You're listening to Unmuted Love. Hi there, I'm C. Eshelman, and with 35 years as a marriage and family therapist and 25 years as a parent of 2 children I brought home from the foster care system, I want to welcome you here to Unmuted Love Podcast, the one place where nothing is off limits to say out loud about parenting children from difficult beginnings.
Stop for a minute, stop and breathe for a minute, long it over your head, try to listen instead, won't you? Think for a minute, who you want to be for a minute, don't get over your head, you're like everyone else, aren't you?
Sometimes it's real sweet around here, and sometimes it ain't so pretty, because this is 100% Unmuted Love. So let's go.
You'll be just
Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to have you back for Unmuted Love. Today is part 4 of Brave Love with Amanda Savarino. I'm so excited. So this is our 6-part series that we just this minute decided needed to be 7. So instead of giving you 7, we're going to go with part 4A today and then part 4B next time. Follow the script. We are actually making it longer while not saying we're making it longer. So we're going. But the reason we did that is that we're just like, wow, this is a lot. And it's so awesome. And it's so filled with really good information that we don't want to rush it. So we're just going to do half today, and then we'll do half next time. All right. So stay tuned. You're not going to get the whole shebang today, but you will get it in the future. So hello, Amanda. How are you?
Hi, C. I'm doing great today, and I'm very excited to be back. Today, I'm excited about our topic because this is when things start to shift from, oh my gosh, this is so hard, to, oh my gosh, there's a path forward, and this is some stuff that I can learn and do. And I love this part.
Right. So we're talking today about a lens. We're talking about a paradigm shift. We're talking about looking at behavior through a lens that's different than what most of us grew up with. And it's looking at it through a brain, body, nervous system perspective. So I tend to talk about it as a brain first model. And I noticed that Amanda talks about it as a nervous system perspective, and they're both true. They're both the same. So if you hear us interchanging those 2 words, that's what we're going to be talking about. It all means the same thing. With that, I think I'll just jump over into what we're talking about today. So Amanda, you want to give it a go?
Yeah. So the title I made for today is Behavior, comma, a Nervous System Perspective. And the reason I said that is because what we as parents are sort of brought up to look for is behaviors and to respond to behaviors. So what we're doing is we're seeing something that we want to correct in the moment, and we're taught to respond to that thing, the outward expression of whatever the struggle is. And so I want to talk about shifting our view into the nervous system, which includes your brain. So it, like C said, it's the same thing. Your nervous system, your brain, and all of your sensory inputs are your nervous system. Let's look at that experience in the child instead of just their behaviors. And that's the paradigm shift. The importance of understanding behaviors through this lens of nervous system experience, I guess is the way to describe it.
So I'm often saying things like all behavior is communication, and what is your child telling you? And sometimes people think that that is some kind of message in words or some cognitive message, but that's not really what I mean. What I mean is your child is sending you a message with their behavior that is from their brain and their body experience. It's important to pay attention to the brain and the body before you go about deciding why your child did what they did. Truth is, I always thought I knew, and then I learned that I really hardly ever know unless I look through a different lens. So this is our opportunity to share with you how we have come to see behavior when in the beginning, neither of us saw it this way.
Right. And what happened is that I felt like I had an aha to the whole world after I sort of figured this out, right? It applies to our children, which is the pressing need, when you have someone living in your home that is coming from like a trauma experience. You need to understand that. That's the pressing need. But I started to be able to view everyone through this lens, the clerk at the grocery store, the person in front of me in traffic, because I started to be able to see that the way everyone was acting was because of the internal experience they were having. And also I quickly was able to say, oh, So because of that, I see that they're doing the best they can. So it sort of bleeds into this more generous way of viewing behaviors or things that are hurting or inconveniencing you. And it was a huge shift for me. But the beginning of it was filled with lots of questions about, is this real? Is this a bunch of hooey? Are you just, is this woo woo? Are you trying to like hippify me here? I don't know if I believe it. And so I needed to understand deeply. And I hope we can communicate that today. What was happening in my child, what I was looking for, and how I translated that into actions that I could take or not take, more often the case.
Right. And you know what? Once I started learning this, the epiphany I had, which just seems silly now because it's so obvious, is that, oh, wait, my behavior is communication too. And my behavior is about my brain and my body, right? And once I realized that, then I realized, wow, okay, we're all humans, right? I'm a human, my kid's a human, and none of us are bad. Right.
Right. So much more compassion for yourself and your kids once you realized that. That was a huge doorway for me. Yeah. And the most important part turned out actually to be the compassion for myself. Weirdly, I thought it would be the other way around, but having compassion for my big reactions to my children made me be less hard on myself. And because of that, I was able to be more patient with everyone in my life because I wasn't like white knuckling it through my day. So it was a little backwards from what I thought would happen.
Yeah. And that concept of white knuckling is what, when I was first learning this, I thought I was being told that I should suck up my feelings and just hold tight and hold on for the ride of whatever behavior was in front of me and work really hard to make sure I could think about what might the behavior be. And the whole time, like as I'm telling you that, I have my fists doubled. I feel my neck kind of stressed and my face is rigid and weird. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what my kids were looking at, right? This very intense, ready to fight person, because that's what white knuckling is like, right? You're actually holding back a torrent of feelings. So until you really understand brain body processes, it's really hard to know, what are we doing here? What does it mean to have a paradigm shift? What are you really doing?
And I feel like in this part, this paradigm shift part, it might be really helpful to give specific examples of moments where I had epiphanies. And I spent some time over the past couple weeks thinking about these like very specific parenting moments. And I'll just share a couple and obviously chime in if it triggers any for you.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
yeah, so a couple things that came up for us really frequently that were big triggers for me and where I had very little compassion is when we would do special things for our kids, vacations, just fun days at a fun place, gifts, breaking out of our routine to like do something new, or especially birthday parties and holidays.
No, birthday parties.
Birthday parties are the actual worst. The actual worst. And before I had this paradigm shift, I would A, for some reason, be surprised every time it happened. B, I would think okay, this time I've got it for some reason. And C, be so angry at what I interpreted as unappreciative or entitled my child was behaving. That was what their behaviors told me. Their behaviors told me this kid does not appreciate this. He is entitled. He's spoiled. That's what I learned about behaviors. Once I had this paradigm shift, I saw, oh, this is really overstimulating. There's a lot of demands. We're outside of our routine. He's tired. There's a lot of people looking at him. There's so many expectations. And the impact on his brain or nervous system or his capacity for that moment was tremendous. And he had nothing left for like being polite or sitting still or all these ridiculous expectations. So for me, those were the ones where I started to understand first, oh, I'm putting him in like a situation where he actually cannot succeed. He has no chance.
Right. And that's really what's true for me for every holiday. We're going to have Christmas and there are going to be all these presents and it's going to be really fun and it's going to be just like my childhood. No. Just the excitement alone, the anticipation was such a pressure on the kids waiting to see what they got for Christmas. The buildup would start somewhere after Thanksgiving, like it would start then. And the behavior would just be off the charts. And I'd be thinking, come on now, it's a whole month. You have to wait a whole month. So cool your jets. It'll be fine. You're going to get presents. Don't worry. And it would just ramp up and ramp up and ramp up. And by the time Christmas got here, I was like, I don't care. I don't care what.
Yes.
Just open them. Just open them. I don't care. I'll be in the kitchen.
Yeah, there's no
terrible.
joy. No joy left here. I have nothing to give you.
No. And then, of course, the typical stuff where the kids do open the presents and they like the box better than the toy. I mean, that's just like the icing on a very bitter cake.
Very.
Oh, you like the box, but you don't like the gift that you just smashed into little pieces 5 minutes later.
Yeah, in frustration, because either you couldn't put it together or you didn't want it. Yeah, right, exactly. I think this leads us beautifully into the next sort of big point. And you talk about this a lot. I feel like you should get to say it. This is like a C. Eshelman classic line.
It is dropping your agenda. We could say it together.
Dropping your agenda.
It's like, yes. And you know what? Someone this last week, a parent, said to me, I never understood what you meant when you said slow and low. I never understood what you meant when you said, drop your agenda. I didn't know that you were talking about low demand. And I'm like, okay, well, okay. But every time you have an agenda, put your shoes on, put your coat on, get your breakfast, hurry up, brush your teeth. Did you brush your teeth? When are you going to brush your teeth? Brush your teeth now, right? Every sentence is one demand on top of the next demand on top of the next demand, right? And so at some point, almost everyone's child throws up their hands and says a big fat no, not doing it. I'm done. And that just looks like being a bad kid, right? You're just being a bad kid. You're being resistant. You're being stubborn. You're refusing. Just the words we call it, refusal. Your refusal. And I'm like, okay, well, that's right. That's what it seems like. That's what it feels like. In that moment, if what you can do is go, okay, hold up. I just put 6 demands out there in the world. I just gave them 6 different directions. They started showing me with their face that they weren't moving in the direction of toothbrush at all. They started showing me with their bodies that they are just shutting down. They are starting to get that look on their face like deer in the headlights. And I know what comes next after that. Somebody's going to get something thrown at them, and it's usually going to be me. And it's like all because I was so busy having this agenda about how we were going to move through this next few steps, right? So dropping your agenda just means, hey, look, you just overwhelmed your kid with whatever this is. Even if you don't think it's overwhelming, it is. And they have just lost their minds in a mind-body kind of way. Not in a I don't want to thought kind of way, but just more like my body cannot take one more demand from you, Mom. And then they go off, right? They go off into behavior. The thing I'm always saying is, hey, just for a second, drop that agenda. Drop the agenda that they have to get their shoes on right now, or they have to brush their teeth right now, or you have to turn that TV off right now. I don't care what you're watching. I don't care that you don't want to. I don't care that you're not hungry. I don't care that you don't want to go to school. That's my agenda for you, and you're on my agenda, so let's hop to it. And then, of course, those are huge demands, right?
And a thing that impacted me a lot, because I think this concept I got mainly, it was a seed planted and the flower started to grow from you. And then I went on to learn and understand why, after that.
Sure.
And as I went on to learn and understand, I began to see that each one of those demands beyond their capacity, which maybe the first one was beyond their capacity, but each additional one puts them into this fear or freeze, some kind of reactive state to the discomfort that their nervous system is in. And they can't access the part of their brain from that state that would allow them to do any of the things you just asked them to do, whether it's to behave a certain way or perform a task or show you evidence of something. It's literally not possible. And I started to be able to really see kiddos from trauma or kiddos in a neurodivergent way not having any ability to meet these needs as having a disability. So instead of having a resistant, badly behaving, disrespectful child, I now have a child with a nervous system disability. Okay, there's compassion right there. I can find compassion there. And the way I can connect to the experience that they're having is the millions of times I've been outside of my capacity, right? The millions of times they've been screaming in a grocery store and I can't think straight. Like, I know how that feels. I can connect to that. And if I can just remember to connect to it in that moment, I can slow down and view it through that lens of a complete lack of access to the thing I'm asking them to do.
The way I like to look at it is when you're the parent, the feeling is he won't do what I'm telling him to do. He won't do what I'm asking him to do. He won't do what he's supposed to do. He won't do it. Through this paradigm shift lens, it's he can't. can't do it right now. And he could do it yesterday maybe, but he can't do it right now because today's a different day.
That's such a big one. That's the thing that I think really messes with our minds a little bit, is that inconsistency, or I've seen it's called a spiky behavior profile. The ability to do something one day or one moment in the day that you're still in and not now feels very much like a behavior or intention on the child's part. But as we get super curious and we get super attuned to our kids, which is the real task here, we start to be able to consider what has happened between then and now. Did they sleep well last night? Did they eat breakfast this morning? Did they have a really demanding day at school yesterday, and today they're just needing to recover? Did someone say something to them that I don't even know about? Like, there's a million. And even if you can't pinpoint what it is, you just have to assume the best. You have to assume that they're doing their best in any moment, which they are, because ultimately, what do kids want? Connection and safety. It's a biological drive. Even if you see no evidence of it, it's a biological drive. So
that's right.
if they're not performing it in a way that feels good to you, it doesn't mean that that's still not a part of their everyday experience. They want to feel safe and connected, and they can't. Imagine how hard that would be. Imagine feeling that way. Imagine being desperate for safety and connection and not being able to just put your shoes on when someone asked you to, because who knows why. That was big for me. That helped me so much. And I see that helping other parents I work with. It's like the first little chip in the wall, that like, okay, this is radical acceptance. I have to fully believe that my child in every moment is doing the best that they can.
That's right.
That's
the key, is believing that we're all good inside and that we're not bad inside, and that we all do the best we can when we can, right? And doing the best I can at any given moment. And so are our children. And also my experience, despite all the times I've been spit in the face at, or I've been called a name, or I've been pushed or shoved or pinched or whatever, I know that my children still always wanted to be loved by me. They wanted connection with me, but they were harmed. Their ability to know how to get that need met was not there. And they were too overwhelmed to think it through, right? So they were just on, I'll get it any way I can. And if getting your attention means pinching you or spitting at you or calling you the B word, well, okay, that's what I got right now, but I still need you. That took me a long, long time to really realize, right? Because I get my feelings hurt by all that, and then I would be offline about it, so it was hard for me to access what I knew, which was, okay, they don't really hate me. They don't really want to hurt me, and then of course the outside world was always telling me, yes, they do. Yes, they are. They're being bad. That behavior's not okay. And I'm like, I'm not saying the behavior's okay. I just want you to hear that, folks. I'm not saying the behavior's okay. I'm just saying it is, right? It is. And then if we understand it and we see it through the right lens, then we have a chance to actually work with it in a different way. So through a different lens.
Right. A lens that doesn't make us feel hopeless. Honestly, because if you're seeing it through a lens of them having no ability to care or being just a bad or broken person, there's no hope in that. There's no possibility for healing if that's the lens you're seeing things through. It's almost like, in order to succeed, well, it's not almost like, it is. In order to succeed in creating any kind of relationship between your nervous system and their nervous system, you have to make this switch, because you'll never feel safe in their presence if you fundamentally believe that they're not good people, and then they can never feel safe in your presence. And if you can just attune to how hard it is for you to feel safe and under control while they are not, that is exactly how hard it is for them in every moment to feel safe with you, because they have a core hyperprotective nervous system experience that almost never feels safe. So those moments when your kid is heightened and you're in this like heightened state, you can't access logic, you just want to scream at them. Just tap into that, because that's how they felt so much of their life, right?
So I want to take a second to just sort of shift over into neuroscience for a second to just talk about what's really happening. So when demands pile up, or when a child's threat system is activated, and this would be a child or a person, doesn't matter who we're talking about really, if these things start building up, then what happens is our brains get triggered, and it's not a very long way between perfectly okay and perfectly not okay. They get triggered into a toxic stress state where their brain, their prefrontal cortex, that's the front part of their brain where all of their executive functions live. And if that's not really clear, because it's still neuroscience, it's their ability to think clearly, their ability to remember, their ability to follow directions, their ability to hear, their ability to have good judgment, their ability to have cause and effect or sequential thinking, right? There's so much in the prefrontal cortex, which right in that front part of your brain that gets flooded immediately once you're in toxic stress with cortisol and adrenaline. Frankly, I've said this before, but I'll say it again. It's like Clorox being poured on your child's brain. Same with you. It's like Clorox being poured on your brain. The difference is your brain is fully developed and your child's brain is not. And so they're really getting a dose of poison basically to the brain at regular intervals when they have toxic stress in their early lives, trauma in their early lives, and it's being flooded constantly with cortisol and adrenaline. And when that happens, what happens is all those functions that I just said go completely offline. And all the child can think about is surviving you. So they either fight you, or they collapse to get away from you, or they run down the street. And then some kids maybe go, okay, mommy, I'll do whatever you want. That's called fawning. That is a form of survival brain. We don't see it a whole lot, but we do see it. Sometimes we don't recognize it. Sometimes we think of it as, oh, look at my good behaviored child.
Right.
But anyway, that's all they have when their prefrontal cortex is flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. Those are the stress hormones. And so we have to be aware that when I say, parent the brain of your child, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying pay attention to the state of your child's brain. In a second, we're going to talk about bandwidth, and we'll talk about what that means. But that's what we're really talking about is how much capacity does your child have at any given moment to think with their whole prefrontal cortex rather than their survival brain. And that's a question you have to ask yourself every time you see what you think of as not good behavior, as bad behavior, because something is happening in their bandwidth. Something is happening to their capacity to do what they want to do, which is the right thing. Kids want to do the right thing. They want to be, quote, good. They want to do well. They want their parents to shine on them. They don't want all the negativity. They don't want to feel bad about themselves. They don't want to feel ashamed. They don't want any of that. But when they're in survival brain, all they have are 4 responses. They fight you, they run from you, they stare at you like deer in the headlights, or they act syrupy sweet. And then you already feel like, oh, well, that's so fake. And then you can't even accept it if they act like that. So anyway, that's all they have. You want to add to that, Amanda?
Well, I was thinking I want to just give a couple dropping your agenda examples because, again, it fleshes it out.
Yeah,
so these were ones that I thought of as the harder ones for me in the beginning. Now they seem like small beans. But being late to school, this was very hard for me.
Totally.
Letting go of getting to school on time. And I had more than one child. So having to make arrangements for my other child to get taken to school on time if he was ready, which he was not always ready. But if he could do it that day, I needed to have a backup person. And this was hard for me. And my other child was late to school. He was late to school a lot. His shoes weren't tied. His eyes were puffy because he was in a rage for, it was a tough thing for me to let go of. How about clothing? Can he wear the same clothes every single day if that's the only way he can feel sane while he's sitting in a classroom? That was hard too. We finally negotiated where I could buy multiples of the same shirt instead of him wearing the actual same shirt every day. But, for a while, it was the same shirt every day. Meals, very hard. Any kind of eating. Where we ate, what we ate, how much we ate, when we ate, and understanding capacity helped me with this. If he doesn't eat something, he will have no capacity for anything else because he will be in survival mode if he is starving. So if I can fight him right now on what he eats or when he eats or where he eats, but we are not going to get anywhere because he has no capacity to make a logical choice in this moment. So it's more important for me right now to let him eat something, whatever the thing is he can eat, and we can have that other conversation later, and we can build from that place of safety where I met his need later. So I had to get real relaxed about food. And I was not relaxed about food. That was not how I was. So that was a big shift for me. One more thing is chores, like needing your kid to do chores. We finally got there, but I had to consider so many sensory issues when I considered what ways my kids could help me. And I needed to really understand that that wasn't them being willful. These were like very demanding experiences for them, that like dishes, that's a million sensory uh-ohs and no thank yous for most kids that are like very sensitive. So we had to really find the ones for them that worked. And that took a lot of trial and error and me being very generous with any assumptions that I was going to make about why they didn't do the chore. So those are some examples I think that come up in everybody's life every day if you have a child that struggles.
For sure. And that was really true in my house. I remember my son, I would go to work before the kids would get off to school, and which was by design because they resisted going to school when I was home. They weren't able to, for whatever the reasons were. I created a lot of stress in the house when I'm home because just my presence creates some stress. Even when I'm, on my very best mommy behavior, just trying to please mommy often creates a lot of stress. I decided they were old enough. I'll just go to work and then you guys get yourself to school. The only thing I ask is that you clean off the kitchen counter so we don't get ants by the time I get home. And then, of course, I would come home at the end of the day and I would look and I would see, well, I can see what you had for breakfast. You had toast and it had peanut butter and jelly on it and maybe maple syrup. I don't know what you did, what you made with that. Maybe you put that on your toast too. I'm not sure, but I still see it. And my son would say, I cleaned it, Mom. I cleaned it. And I'm like, sure you did. I did, Mom. I did. And of course, now I'm narrowing his bandwidth, right? Because I'm not believing him. And I'm doing it in this way that's like, I know you're lying to me. So now I'm not believing him. And there's a little underlying accusation that he's lying to me about it. And then he said, no, I did, Mom. And I'm like, okay, clearly you need some learning about how to do this. So we go into the kitchen. I'm like, show me what you did on this very same counter. And so he takes a sponge, he wets it, he does all the things, right? And he cleans the counter again. And then when I look at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can still see what you had for breakfast. How did you do that? And it turns out his proprioception was so difficult for him that he couldn't push hard enough on the sponge to actually get all the crumbs and all the peanut butter and all the jelly and syrup off the counter because he actually really did. Now he'd cleaned it twice. He cleaned it in the morning and he cleaned it for me in the afternoon and it still wasn't clean. So I had to take that into consideration and realize, oh my gosh, that's an impairment. That has nothing to do with him not doing what I asked him to do. These things were all, slow in coming for me. I mean, he was probably 13 when I got that realization. I knew about his proprioception, which is, how hard or how soft a touch something is, but I just didn't really see how it was working out in behavior always. And so this was like a real epiphany for me.
I had almost the exact same experience. That's so funny, that story. I'm like, yep, exactly that. And even down to having him do it again and being like, oh my gosh, you are telling me the truth.
Yeah.
And he's 19 and he still struggles with that. And that's okay. That is okay. Because if I want it to be different, then I'll do it. But he's doing the best he can in that moment.
Right. So that's also an example of dropping your agenda, insisting that it be done your way. And then if it's not done your way, that they didn't do it or that it's wrong or that there's something wrong with them, which, there might be an impairment, which you could say is something wrong with them, or you could say, this is my child who doesn't touch things as strongly as I do or strong enough to get the counter as clean as I would like it. But it doesn't make for a bad child. And it doesn't mean I'm a bad parent because when I come home from work, the house looks like somebody ate toast all over it, which was the other part, right? So if things weren't done, then it was sort of like, oh, this is reflection on me, which is ridiculous. Of course it's not, but that's still how I took it.
That's a big one. That's a big one for dropping your agenda, is also letting go of this feeling that you need to have your life look a certain way for other people's enjoyment or judgment or eyes, however they're going to view it. Letting go of that idea completely. Your life's going to look the way that works best for you so that you can have connection with your family and feel joy. That's what your life looks like. And if it's messy, too bad. That was so hard. I was very worried about what other people thought of me. I had a hard time with that one.
And what's so hard right now when I'm thinking about it is like, this must sound to some of you who are new to therapeutic parenting principles, or you're new to this concept of the nervous system perspective or paradigm shifting into a brain first approach, then this may seem like, how does anybody ever make that paradigm shift when the whole world is completely, that's why it's called a paradigm shift. The whole world is the opposite. The whole world is looking at traditional parenting and do what you're told and do it right and do it right now. And if you don't, then you have to have some kind of consequence. And if you came from my family, it would be punishment, not consequence. So there are lots of things, right, that you have to shift out of. And I'm thinking right now, this must be seriously overwhelming to think about. And, Amanda and I promised you that we would get to capacity and we talk about bandwidth, and we're going to, but we're going to actually put this in series 4, part B. Right? Yeah, it's going to get there. Because we've spent a lot of time talking about dropping your agenda and a lot of different pieces in there. There's a lot to this topic. And so we probably could have made the entire series about this, which we might someday because we'll realize, wow, we were just skimming the surface. But for right now, I'm thinking we'll stop here. What do you think, Amanda?
I think that's a great idea because I don't want to give short shift to capacity. It's such an important one. Bandwidth capacity is important.
Well, that's it for today. Do you have any last brilliant gems to offer?
I just want to say stay tuned because there's more practical applications for your experience in the next part. This part feels like, so I'm just not going to ask them to do anything. That's not true. We get more in depth in the next one. So don't give up yet. Come back.
Oh yeah. So this parenting style isn't about never holding anyone accountable or never asking anything or always saying, oh, it's okay. There are ways, right? There are ways to parent children that are less demanding and more understanding and more loving, and they still learn. That's what us parents are all about, right? Helping our kids learn how to be productive people in their lives. And that's really the key, right? Productive people in their own lives, not in our lives, but in theirs. So stay tuned for next part of Brave Love, the fourth part of this series, and we'll call it 4B. All right, everybody, take care. And remember, your love matters when more than love is required. Hey parents, this is C. Get the help you need to end destructive and chaotic behavior in your home while parenting children from difficult beginnings. I know you need help, and the Love Plus parenting model actually works. I'm inviting you to work with me personally for 6 months in my virtual therapeutic parent program, and I guarantee you results or 100% of your investment back. How is that for a blue ribbon deal? I'm looking forward to working with you. See you on the inside.
Stop for a minute. Stop and breathe for a minute. Long it over your head. Try to listen instead, won't you? Think for a minute. Who you want to be for a minute. Don't get over your head. You're like everyone else, aren't you? You could gain from being a bit nicer. Knowing to talk and when to shut your mouth.
The UnMuted Love podcast is hosted by me, C. Eshelman, attachment and trauma specialist at the Attach Place in Sacramento, California. Our podcast producer is the amazing Saya Clark, and our theme song is Nicer by Houses on the Hill, licensed through Epidemic Sound. Thank you for being such loyal listeners here on UnMuted Love. I'll see you all next week.
You'll be just fine.